to the life and legacy of Chief Michael A Ojomoh. This is the third and final video in a three-part documentary about the great man from Amedokhian, Uromi. In this last part of the video, we will learn about his business mindset, his real legacy, and the message we can all take home from these three-part video presentations. The first is his approach to business and what can possibly be his success formula. Now, why is that even important to know? Why should we care about his approach to business and how he rose from ordinariness in Amedokhian to eminence in Benin, where he set a standard so high that many of us living today will be intimidated to measure up to? Well, it is important that other people in Amedokhian and beyond can learn from him and maybe try to replicate his passes. You see, this world does not belong to any single one of us, be you a king, a president, or an ordinary person if you like. We are all simply passing by and making our experiences along the way. And maybe we can make a better experience when we understand the basic arithmetic of life, that we are not here forever. Therefore, we must do what we have to do and pass on our experience before our limited time is over. So we need to learn everything we can from the giants who have made way for us and upon whose shoulder we are now standing to see ahead of us.
There's one thing that I learned from my father, is that growth and success has to be a slow but sure process, so that when you climb up the ladder, you don't come back falling down. You have to involve yourself in viable business, profitable business, legal business, and there's perseverance. So as a houseboy to start with, he was very loyal to the late Dalton Asemuta. And when he left, it was with his blessings. And then he got involved with Adenya and worked his way through the ropes, from being a bookseller, working in the bookshop, being a bookkeeper, and then working his way through the ranks. For me, that was a very, very strong lesson, because these stories he shared with me from when I was very young. And it taught me the beauty of diligence, perseverance, and being faithful to your cause. So for me, that was always, it's always been a life lesson, to make sure that, one is engaged with business or a career that is clearly identifiable. And you persevere and hold on to that which is your chosen cause. And later on, after being a bookseller, we would go into construction and did a lot of work across the country. I remember as a child, we would spend a lot of time wondering where my father was. Sometimes we hear he's in Nauchi, sometimes we hear he's in Port Harcourt, and the next thing we hear is in Jos, is in Kano, Kaduna, Maiduguri. So he was a very busy man, very focused, but very hardworking. My father would always be awake by 4:30. He's already up, 4:30 in the morning, planning his day. Again, that is something I learned from him. Success has to have a plan. You have to work hard, and there are many sacrifices that you must make. So his was one of diligence. So as I said, at 4:30, he would already be awake, planning his schedule for the day. And his workers were always, very worried, because my father was always going to be on site before everybody. So lateness was not something that he tolerated. So, and of course, if the boss is already on site, you have no business being late. So work always started early, and he was fair to his workers, pay them as and when, and at a godly rate as well. So I know there were many of his workers who were with him, in fact, for all of their life. Some are even inherited.
I wasn't too close at the earlier days to be able to know some of the such experiences he had. But I know that he did mention to me his experience with the fish business. Because when he decided to go into fish business, fish importation and distribution, the biggest company or person in that business at the time was the Hebrew family. And then he decided to build storage facilities in Benin along that Etete road. And he actually had, as I was told, the biggest fish warehouse in the Midwest, in Benin State. And he went big into that fish business, and he actually made huge wealth from that business. But he then told me later on when we spoke that he ran into a lot of difficulties because at a stage, getting spare parts to maintain those cold rooms became difficult because at the time he built it, there were Lebanese people that actually came to do the installation. And then at a certain stage, maintenance became so difficult.
The frozen fish business, which I think a lot of people knew him for later in life, trading with the Irish, trading with the Russians, and also with the Lebanese very early on. And there are many established frozen fish dealers today who were mentored by him, who he raised, who he would give a long line of credit. And today they are established in the frozen fish business.
I know, it's conceivable that he must have had a lot of vicissitude on the way to wealth and fame. However, I don't have much information to share on that front because at the time he was still building up his business empire, I was too young to know.
Very simple. Very, very simple to enumerate. One, hard work, honesty, reliability, perseverance, diligence. I think those were my father's success recipe. That was it. If we were to do a menu, a recipe for success for him, those are the things I would like to say. I never one day, my father was never taken to court by anybody one day for any kind of quarrel, any type of business deal that went wrong, for land grabbing, or taking somebody's life, whatever. He lived a very as clean as a man can be. I'm not saying he was perfect, but he tried to always be on the side of right as much as he could. So I think something to emulate, and try and live his own tenets. The man who definitely feared God. He respected his fellow man, whether you were younger than him, whether you were not as blessed as him. He had respect for everybody, and I think this endeared him to many people. And for these attributes, he was loved by a lot of people.
One thing that quickly jumped to my mind is the discipline of the man himself. One thing is to have a lot of wealth, which in this case was due to hard work and untold sacrifices. Another thing is to have discipline and accountability for every single kobo or naira that is spent. As many experts will say about the question of wealth creation and retention, it's all more about a question of attitude than the amount of money in the bank. That too is something we need to learn from this bigger-than-life personality from Asan. How disciplined can we be if we want to emulate the character of this man?
one that I can readily remember is his almost fanatical belief in non-wasting. And I will give you an example. While he was building that massive edifice, he would get angry, very angry with a worker that he meets. Maybe he's a carpenter working, and then he meets nails, maybe 5 pieces of nails on the floor. And he will call the guy and say, do you know nails cost money? Why would you want to waste these nails? And if you look at it, and then he will give the guy a lecture on the need for prudence in whatever you do. You know, that actually struck me as something very important because a lot of us are wasteful. You see, you go to a party because you are not the one buying the food. People fill their plates with all sorts of food that they know they cannot eat. And then suddenly you find plates that are half eaten. Because many of us have not yet imbibed this culture of prudence. Prudence is different from stinginess. Because when you are finicky about such things, a lot of people will regard you as stingy. Just like they say of Peter Obi in the current political scene. But what Chief Ojomoh taught me is that if you need 10 nails to build a structure, it is wasteful to use 15. You know, and that for me, that was very significant because a lot of people who are rich, there are a lot of people who fall into money, carelessly fall into money, if you know what I mean in Nigerian terms. Money they have not sweated for. When it is being wasted, they don't care. For example, you see a governor going, he has a convoy made up of 30 vehicles. All those vehicles have to be fueled. All the hangers on in those vehicles, including the driver, political jobbers, they collect allowances, you know, and then they make noise all over the place and money is being burnt. And yet, most of our system don't know that that is waste. So that's what somebody like Ojomoh was very prudent in spite of his immense wealth. And I'm not surprised that the children he has raised, especially Barrister Louis Ojomoh, with whom I'm very, very friendly and familiar. Barrister Ojomoh loves giving, but is not wasteful. And I think he learned that from his dad. And then he keeps talking of going to develop your place. Because he was in Benin, he lived in Benin all his life, made his money in Benin, had his businesses in Benin, had his real estate empire in Benin, got his chieftaincy title in Benin, even though he also got one at Uromi. However, he told everybody that cared to listen that at the end of the day, he's an Amedokhian man, and it's as Amedokhian is going to be buried. Therefore, he must develop the place to make it better than he meant it. For me, that's a big lesson for us to imbibe.
I would say my father's first vision was to be a father to children who were well educated. You know, he didn't receive the kind of education that I think he would have liked because, you know, of his position in life very early on, where he lost both parents. So he was always very keen to make sure that his children were well educated. So that was, I think, his first dream. And I would say, thank God that he achieved that. And all of us, I would say, have been well educated, well exposed. His second dream was always to be in a position where he's able to help people. I think he achieved this as well. I think even if today you were to go to Uromi or even Benin, yeah, and mention his name, people remember him mostly for his generosity. And also, he had an open door policy in his house. Between 12 o'clock noon and 2 o'clock, my father would always prepare lunch for anybody who cared to come and eat with him. He never liked to eat alone. So it was always customary that between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock, anybody in Benin was welcome to come to his office, where he would always have at least 3 different dishes available. And I think many people remember that. So he was definitely his brother's kid. His third dream was to make his village, Amedokhian, to be a Mecca in Eastern land. And he went his way to try and do this.
There used to be this saying that Ojomoh or Amedokhian Kiewebo. That translates loosely to that Chief Ojomoh has turned Amedokhian community to a very developed city. Like developed city, what is obtainable in developed communities abroad.
He also wanted to rebuild all the houses in Amedokhian. So for anybody who agreed to have his house, his mud house, rebuilt in concrete and blocks, he would also do that. And he had begun that project. Unfortunately, due to, I would say, internal quarrels and issues within the village itself, he never actualized that dream.
He also had a plantation where the community, the land I was given to him by Amedokhian community, where he had hoped to be able to bring a company for juice processing.
Citrus fruit farm in Amedokhian, where he intended to set up a juice factory, employing indigenes of Amedokhian, creating employment and a source of income. But unfortunately, I say again, because of internal wranglings within the community, that did not achieve fruition.
Part of the space now is where you have the Institute of Construction and Technology and Management, Amedokhian Uromi. He brought water for us. He was the first person to sink an industrial borehole where our people were going to get water.
In terms of general assistance, helping people, providing resources, providing money, whatever problem that was brought to him, my father was always ready. Another dream that he had was also to create confidence in Amedokhian sons and daughters who were not at home, that they could come home, invest at home, build houses, stay there without fear of the supernatural. And for that reason, he told me, he decided to build a very magnificent structure in Amedokhian as a symbol that it was possible to come home, be visible, and not be subject to spiritual attack or to be afraid of the supernatural. So these were some of the dreams that I had, and I think to a large extent he was able to achieve them. But of course, death respects no one, and today his legacy lives on. We do try to do the best that we can. He had very large shoes, and personally, I would not even try to fill his shoes.
The late Chief Michael A Ojomoh was a man with many hats, and he certainly did represent the Amedokhian and Esan culture in the best way possible. And there were many moves he made to show that his intention and choices were not random, but that he was a deliberate lover and promoter of Esan culture and heritage. Talking of Chief Ojomoh as a man of culture, his magnificent building in Amedokhian is one of the many testimonies of that. A meticulously designed edifice with significant Eastern cultural regalia. Even as a young person then in Amedokhian, I'm going to visit when the great Ojomoh was around and people were trooping inside the building, or when we have gone there to fetch water beside the building, I could see that there were more to those masterfully designed pieces of architecture. There was nothing similar around that I know of. But how could this have been, especially for the fact that he was not even royalty when he ran away from Amedokhian as a young man? For that, I want you to pay attention to the evolution of the story. This is a man of exceptional character, a man who knew his mission in life and he was ready to fulfill that mission as he so well did.
You see, nationwide, Benin City is regarded as the center of culture and tradition. And Chief Ojomoh actually, business here grew when he was already a grown young man, all to the time he died. He lived in Benin City. His closeness to Omonopa Nendo, actually may have influenced his deep interest in culture and tradition. Because as you know, you cannot be a chief in the upper palace and not be a culture exponent. Therefore, I think that has a lot of influence in his worldview with respect to culture and tradition. However, he wasn't just somebody who had a deep interest in culture and tradition. He was somebody who actually espoused it. And his influence in among the chiefs in Eastern land and in Benin, indeed Benin City. I can tell you why he was building that house at Uromi. How many Benin chiefs and people that are cultural custodians in the Benin Kingdom kept visiting. It was almost like a carnival. Every day he was in Uromi. A load of food and drinks coming all the way from Benin daily.
There can be no doubt that the late Chief Michael A Ojomoh was a man of culture, a man who knows tradition. Like I did say, he was a chief in Benin and was also a chief in Uromi community. And he was always home whenever there are festivals and celebrations. Whenever you go to him, you will see him, even though he couldn't speak Ishan fluently. He made every attempt to relate with people who came from home to visit him. He was indeed connected to the culture of his people. I think I recall him also wearing this attire and putting on what we call Igbo Dudu and Injapa in ceremonial occasions. Of course, he would always be invited to such occasions and he would deck himself in this manner.
He is also well linked to the Uromi Palace. And in that palace, he also tried to influence cultural things. You talked about his house. If you see the nature of that house, the fence is in the tradition of Benin chiefs. Those lines you see across the fence, that is, I mean the wall, the outer wall, that is actually the way the Benin chiefs wall their houses. And that method, that style is not allowed to be used by a commoner. So as we speak today, you can't, in Benin, at least in Benin Kingdom, you can't build your house and put those patterns on the fence. I'm sure the palace will pull it down and you have questions to answer. So bringing all those to bear when he built his house, even though he was building it at Uromi, has to do with the fact that he was a palace chief and he also liked culture and tradition because, of course, there are those who have their houses today who are chiefs in Benin Kingdom that have not built their house using that traditional motif. So that architectural motif was used because he believes in culture and he espouses it.
He built about the biggest, greatest mansion in Amedokhian Uromi. If you still get to that place today, you will think it is a palace. I even learned that he hosted the Oba of Benin, Oba Erediawa, in that palatial building in his heydays.
I can tell you that when stories are told of Obas and Ojisos in our local folklore, these are revered figures that, I mean, you couldn't possibly think of an Oba of Benin coming to Amedokhian. Even though history also have it that one of the Obas, Oba Ozolwa, if I'm not wrong, actually came to war against some people, and that war ended at Uzea. And folklore also have it that certain things happened there which I am not at liberty to talk about. It will be too heavy for my mouth. So the first Oba to actually visit Amedokhian, I mean, on a courtesy visit to one of his royal chiefs, was that visit by the Oba of Benin in 1986. Why that house, Chief Ojomoh's house at Amedokhian, was under construction. That house is still beauty to behold today, and it's the largest I've ever seen of any traditional ruler or a chief in any of the kingdoms. So when that house was under construction, at the time the Omonoba decided to visit Chief Ojomoh, the house has been decked, the upper floors had been built, and the house has just been roofed. Plastering had just started from the ground floor. And for the revered monarch of Benin to pay such a visit to someone during the construction of his house, not that he was coming during the opening, that tells a lot about the respect he had for Chief Ojomoh. Incidentally, I was there myself. I was there. I knew when we were preparing. I knew when he came. I was upstairs with them. I know that a lot of the chiefs came with him. The chiefs that came with him couldn't have been less than 15 in their traditional royal regalia. And I remember the Sekure then was in the group. And I had some discussion with him because he's the journalist and I like reading his articles, and I discussed some of them with him. So the Omonoba came between 10 and 11 or so. And I can tell you, he didn't leave Amedokhian. He stayed in that house upstairs with a lot of his chief and Chief Ojomoh and a few of very respected Uromi people who came to receive him. And he stayed there till about 5 o'clock before he left for the Onoji's palace at Egwari. And I also went with them. So it tells you about the caliber of the man Chief Ojomoh was.
There can be no doubt about the caliber and personality of the man here in question. But we can't talk about a community like Amedokhian or another place for that matter without mentioning the role of women. This is always important and has always been since the beginning of time.
Possibly one of my father's most treasured possessions. At the age of 5, my father had become an orphan. His father died when he was 5. His mother died much earlier. He never really knew his mother. But from recollections of family members and elders, he had this made because this was a remembrance and how people remembered his mother. His mother was, they used to call her a giant. She was a very huge woman. And this is a life representation based on the memory of people as to what my mother looked like. And missing his mother, my father believed that this is how his mother would have looked after him as a baby, in the arms of his mother.
Chief Ojomoh is a traditionalist to the core. I don't know much about the wife. I have not seriously met with the wife, nor have I ever seen the wife coming to attend meetings in Amedokhian with Chief Ojomoh. He has never come with the wife to start discussing. But let me say this. Before a man can be doing things like this, he is getting the backing and encouragement of the wife. There is no way the wife will not know all of this he has been doing. If the woman is not a good woman, he would have tried as much as possible to influence the husband not to do all he's doing. I gathered that even Ogbemudia and the wife, whether they are related or however, I don't know.
Yeah, I can say just little because I had a little experience, some chance meetings with the wife on a few occasions. However, he was a polygamist. But as far as I know, I think he had 3 wives. I knew 2 of them. I knew the first wife very well. And she was his lifeblood, if I can put it that way. And she was from Benin. And she's Greg's mother. Greg is Chief's first son. Is Louis' mother.
You want me to talk about my mother? Well, I thought this was an interview about my father. If you want to talk about my mother, an old school mother. You know what old school mothers are? You will begin to understand the kind of woman my mother was. She was very strong. She was very intelligent, very wise, very supportive, a strong pillar for the family, very dedicated, devoted. You know, a credit to womanhood. You know, women are sometimes underrated. They're not given the credit that they deserve. But when you see a home that is doing well, progressive, prosperous, congratulate the woman, because there are a lot of sacrifices that are being made in the house. And they have to also, you know, they are giving the man a lot of peace to succeed. So I congratulate my mother, who was also my very good friend. And her death still remains painful. I constantly think of her and thank her for the wisdom and the sacrifices she made. She was very selfless and wasn't interested in materialism. She wasn't bothered about the things of the world. She just wanted her husband always to be happy, to be in good health, and for her children to be successful. That was basically her own focus. And she kept the house in order. As many as we were, kept us all fed, welcomed everybody from my father's side and from our own side. We're all welcome in the house. But let me also say that my father, you asked a question earlier on, and I diplomatically did not answer it. You asked me how many wives did my father have. I think it's only fair to say that my father's success cannot be just attributed to my mother alone, even though I know she was a good woman. But my father had other wives, contributed also immensely to giving him peace and success that he achieved. So I also want to recognize those other women who influenced and played a very big role in our family.
She's late now. Was buried in his house at his palatial compound at Etiti. And Chief says that is the woman that actually was his backbone while growing up, and then his earlier forays into business. And if that woman stepped in while Chief was talking, he would stop talking and quickly attend to her because he had excellent respect for her. Here that he became a polygamist is probably because of his cultural background, because he never played with his first wife, as far as I know, and their respect for each other was mutual.
Like I told you, I went to Benin. The food we ate there was prepared by the woman. So if every day you have the food is being prepared for people, it's the wife that is doing it. If she's grumbling, oh look, I cannot be doing this, so why am I doing this? Eventually, the man will stop it. But I'm believing that the wife was instrumental to the achievements this man made while he was alive. The woman encouraged him and possibly maybe helping him to supervise some of the things he was doing. So I completely conclude that if a man is progressive, if a man is kind, if a man is hospitable, the wife is behind the man.
Well, you know, my mother knew her role and position in my father's life. So once she married my father, she stopped being a Benin woman and became an Asian woman. So it was never difficult for her to accept all the things my father was doing in Asian land because it was being done in her land. So that was very clear to her and you know, very, very simple. However, my father was very generous, and you know, he also was a blessing to my mother's family. There were, you know, people from my mother's family who were educated, you know, all as much education as they wanted, you know, from my father. Some went abroad, sponsored by my father. You know, he equally blessed my mother's side as well. As I said, my father was a very generous man, very generous. So my mother had no issues, you know, being a 2IC, second in command to my father. And she was a very good deputy, never complaining, never criticizing. And I would think, if you ask me, what did my mother give my father that was very valuable? I would say one was peace at home. And secondly, good advice. You know, unbiased, objective advice. I think those two things were my mother's contribution to my father's life, giving him peace at home, welcoming. My father always looked forward to coming home because home was warm for him. You know, after all the troubles outside, you come to your home, you want peace. And then whenever he sought counsel from my mother would give him wise counsel, but she was a very knowledgeable woman. And, you know, the counsel would always be objective and unbiased. And, you know, my father trusted my mother. Absolutely. And she also never let him down.
Based on the man who believes in equity, if you go to his house at Amedokhian, in the front is the main courtyard. And then you get to an area that is gated with a sitting area that was built in a traditional way. Then if you pass those second gates, you enter the inner big courtyard, and then you face the main building. And you will think that is the end. However, behind that main edifice are 3 bungalows, solid, well-appointed bungalows in a semicircular arrangement, built in a traditional way, one for each wife, as you will imagine. Even though those women never lived at Amedokhian, yet were they to visit, they will have each of their own houses to stay with everything provided. That was the nature of the man in terms of his adherence to tradition and his belief in justice and equity for all.
Yes. I'm very happy to talk about my mother because I have been interviewed severally about my father. I've talked over the years about my father, but nobody really has ever asked me about my mother. So I'm very happy to finally publicly say something about her. My mother she was a Benin princess, but having married my father, she embraced Esan land very, very strongly, spoke Esan language fluently, and in recognition of her selfless devotion to her husband and to Esan land, the Onojo of Uromi then, Zaiki, bestowed her with the title of the Ine of Uromi. For those who understand traditional titles, that at the time was the highest title to any woman. And considering that she was from Benin, it was indeed one of the greatest honors for our family. She, as I said, was selfless. She is an embodiment of loyalty. She saw my father, after God, there was no other person that was more important. Her husband was even more important than her children. She held my father in very high regard, had immense respect for the man. I remember, my father sometimes would beat me and he would go out and my mother would come to me and say, listen, your father beat you for a reason. You did something wrong. Now, when he comes back, make sure you go and kneel down. And so, she made sure that the family unit was, the hierarchy, the structure was maintained. I never heard her one day say anything in anger against my father. I'm sure they had their quarrels and arguments. She would never make anything obvious to us. And she instilled this high level of respect and love in us for our father. And she too was very, very devoted to my father. She was actually his housewife. My mother was the first wife who lived in the house with my father. And my father's health was her responsibility. My father's happiness was her responsibility. My father wasn't happy, my mother wasn't happy, And I remember my father telling me that when he was selling books, they would go to Ghana to go and buy books, and my mother would follow him, and they would carry books on their heads through all the markets, and then transport it to Benin. And she always said to me, you know what? If I can attribute my riches to anybody, is to this woman. So both of them had a very, very close relationship. And when my mother died, she died before my father, he said to me, I don't think I'm going to live long. And that's the kind of thing you hear when husbands and wives love each other. So my mother was definitely an old school mother. And again, I think I was very lucky to have a woman like that in my life. I miss her dearly.
What lesson can you really take away from this story? Now, you need to think back to the beginning of the story. Who is this man? Where did he come from? And why did he make all these sacrifices for his people?
From the story of Chief Ojomoh, you can see that he was beaten up, assaulted, humiliated, and he left. He became a great man and returned his greatness to his community. One, that is the spirit of forgiveness. Now, he is a visionary person. He saw that if he stays in this place today, they might kill him. He decided to go away. And when he left, he got what he wanted. God granted all his prayers. He returned back. We should learn from him how to forgive. We should learn from him how to persevere. We should learn from him how to vigorously pursue our dreams and aspirations. And principally, we should learn from him that the home is not a death trap for you when you are successful. Go back to your roots. They will be proud to have you. Don't run away from your people. Because if anybody would have had an excuse to run away, not to visit home, it should have been late Chief Ojomoh. Oh, I was young when I had nothing. I only just made mention of what I'm interested in. They beat me up. They did all this to me. Now that I can eat, if I go back, they will just poison me. They will just do this to me and all of that. He never had that in mind. He believes they did it. They don't know what they were doing. Let me go back to my root. He went back to his root. Like I told you, he will eat with us. When it comes to Amedokhian, I used to go there with my father. We sit down, you eat with him. Look, if when he was alive and you meet him eating, if you are bold enough to grab his spoon and use it to be eating, he will smile and ask for another spoon and be eating. He was so, that man, he was so down to earth. He was so down to earth. He may have stepped on people's toes, I don't know, but the much I know of him is what I'm saying. I'm telling you my own personal experience with him as a young man.
There are quite a number of lessons to learn. Some of them relate to his rise to fame and wealth. Some relate to his humility, and some relate to his belief in culture and tradition and respect for the traditional institution. So if you look at his industry, his industrious nature, the man worked hard for his money. His business ethics was second to none. As I said, he was one of the earlier distributors to Guinness, and he did that business for a very long time. And he did that business so well that over time, he was friends with different managing directors of Guinness, black and white. And I remember Chief Alabi of blessed memory used to visit him at his Etete office. So that means for such managers at high level of blue chip industries to be personal friends to him, it means he displayed good personal, good business ethics, because such companies have very strict codes of business conduct. That's one. Number two, Chief believed so much in education. Even though he had limited one because of his background, if you met Chief in his later life, you will know that Chief himself was an encyclopedia of knowledge who has traveled around the world, and he encouraged education and sponsored quite a number of people, relatives and non-relatives alike. I am aware, for instance, that he played a huge role in the education of the current monarch of Uromi, because that the prince, the heir apparent, actually lost his dad very early in life. And that also explains what he did at the Amedokhian Secondary School and paying school fees for indigent students of the school in order to make sure that the school had enough enrolled population to keep it standing. Thirdly, his respect for culture and traditions. Because if you don't know where you are coming from, you will hardly know where you are going. And I will tell you, when we talk about his legacy today, nobody talks of the number of houses he built. Nobody talks about the bank balances he left. Nobody talks of his investments abroad and locally. What people talk about are the good deeds he did, his impact on his neighbor, his influence that helped to elevate people from poverty.
What I have to tell other people is that whatever you have, if you have money, try to help the poor. Because when you help them, God will help you. That your money will be multiplied. If you go and put it on the bank, that one will not help you. Help others. As you help others, so also God will help you. So that's my message to everybody.
That it is good to be good. He used to say that as well. That it is not for you to ask what people can do for you, but what you can do as a member of your community. And if you are blessed, do not hesitate to also bless others, because your riches is in what you do for others. That is the measure of how rich you are.
So we should learn that our home is our home, it's our root, and that nobody can do you anything. It is only your mind that can do you something. If Chief Ojomoh comes to Uromi and then he went back to Benin, he has some slight headache. Then he has that mindset, oh, it's because I went to Uromi, that's why I had this headache now. The wife will say, you see, you never had headache before. I've told you, don't go home. You are still going home now. Look, headache has come. So that's why I told you just now, the wife is in support of whatever he did to our community. The wife is in support of his returning back home. The wife must have known of this story, but he didn't discourage him. He encouraged him. So that is what I think we should learn from him. And we should look at our village, our town, like I said just now. First, we should think of what to do, how to develop our town, following the footsteps of late Pa Ojomoh.
And in remembering my father, I think this is one of the great legacies, that he was a man who was at his happiest when other people were happy as a result of what he had done. So I hold on to that very dearly, and I advise people, if ever you are able to help, don't withhold your help.
He demonstrated that you could still be who you are, no matter how worthy you are, and still associate with your people. There are people who feel they don't need to come home because they have the impression that once you get home, something could happen to you. Your people have that capacity or will want to draw you down. Even at his time, he was bold enough to associate with people. With his people, he came down home. Nothing happened to him. All that he got from all the association with his people were prayers and blessings. So it is the same thing. Let nobody be afraid wherever you are to identify with your people. We have very many people from our community who today, if you hear their name, you'll be amazed that they are from our area. They hardly want to associate with the people. They are still having that fear that once you come home, your people will bring you down.
If you say what I should remember him for, I will remember him for all things that is good. Like I told you, he's a giver. I told you he's a humble gentleman. I told you he's a lover of not just his family alone, but extended and Amedokhian as a community. And I am sure because he suffered while he was young, he wouldn't want to see anybody suffering. He trained some persons up to the university level. So I remember him for all those goods. And by extension, Amedokhian people should remember him for the good road he has given to them, for the education he has encouraged in that community, for the light he brought there, at least for the exposure for us to see a landline for telephone for once before the coming of all these cell phones and all of them. So he should be remembered for his kindness, for his goodness, for his forgiveness, and returning back to assist in the development of Amedokhian.
I recall when our elders were arrested by the police from State CID in Benin. I had to reach out to Chief Benedion. Benedion said, when I told him that my people in Amedokhian community were arrested, he said, "Is that not Ojomoh community?" I said, "Yes, sir." So He immediately put a phone call across to the commissioner of police, and our people were released. I was able to do that because I invoked the name of that great son of Amedokhian community. So let our people know that home is home. That is the summary of it all. And whatever they have to be able to make their place stronger, their land of birth stronger, and to be heard, they should not hesitate to do so.
The lesson is, no matter what we think wealth means, at the end of the day, what counts is the name you leave behind. And that is why anywhere in the whole of Edo State today, or indeed Nigeria, if you turn up and say, I'm Ojomoh, and they ask you which Ojomoh, and you say Chief Michael Ojomoh of Uromi, they are going to give you attention because the man lived a good life and left legacies. So it is not about the wealth that we pursue every day. It's not about the buildings. It's not about the structures. It's not about the number of wives. It is more about the name, the good deeds you did that live after you. And those good deeds that Ojomoh did are going to remain forever in the annals of Amedokhian community.